I'd like to say a very warm welcome to this talk, which is being organised by the Outer North Enfield Over 50s Forum. We've got Josh Freestone from the North London Waste Authority, who's going to talk about waste recycling. Now, this is a topic which should be close to all of our hearts, because whatever view you take on climate change, getting rid of waste in a useful way is terribly important. So, important topic. Look forward to hearing Josh. And Josh, over to you.
Thank you very much, John. I'll share my screen now. Please let me know if that works.
Seems to have done.
Yep. Just a bit of housekeeping before I start. I'm going to turn my camera off just so that you're not seeing my eyes go across the screen as I'm reading the kind of the presentation. If you have any questions, myself and my colleague Kirsty will do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. It's only about half an hour or so, we always encourage people, if it's a really kind of relevant question, just put it in the chat. There's some interactive sections of the presentation. Again, I usually the kind of best course of action is I'll kind of give the group kind of 30 seconds or so to put the answers in the chat, and then maybe yourself, John, or my colleague Kirsty will just read out the answers to me. They're fairly basic, but it's just to kind of get a bit of participation. Okay, perfect. So hello everyone, my name is Josh and I work for the North London Waste Authority. So I'm the Outreach and Engagement Officer, and my job is to work within the community to try and improve recycling behaviours through education and outreach activities. As I mentioned, my colleague Kirsty, who's in the background of this webinar, she works with me in waste prevention, in the waste prevention team, and she is the Senior Waste Prevention Officer. You might hear her later on if you have any questions. As I said, she has an absolute encyclopedic knowledge of all things waste and recycling. So good morning to everyone at the Enfield Over 50s Forum. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar about how we can recycle more and reduce the amount of contamination in our recycling by changing our everyday behaviours. And I'll get back to that keyword of contamination later. So the aim of our newly launched contamination campaign, aptly named Thanks for Trying, with which this webinar is a part of, is to disrupt current recycling behaviours by improving the knowledge of what is and what is not recyclable in North London curbside collections, and to increase North London residents' motivation to recycle correctly. So what are we going to cover today? So I'll give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do at NLWA, North London Waste Authority. We'll then have a brief discussion of what recycling actually is, because that's sometimes overlooked, and what items should go in the recycling and what items shouldn't. We will then discuss what recycling contamination actually is and why it's a problem for us here in North London. And we then hope to move into kind of an interactive section where we'll look at some scenarios and get you to put your answer in the chat, if that's okay with you guys. And then the final part of the webinar will look at what actions we can all undertake to improve our recycling behaviour and ultimately our recycling knowledge. So who are we and what do we do? So NLWA is a statutory authority with a responsibility for the disposal of waste collected by all of the 7 North London boroughs, which are, of course, Barnet, Camden, Enfield, Hackney, Haringey, Islington, and Waltham Forest. So the roles we undertake are, so we transport and dispose all of the black bag waste collected across the boroughs. We sort through all the different recyclable materials once they've been collected from your doorstep by your local council. We operate the reuse and recycling centres. You might know them formerly known as dumps or tips. And then myself and Kirsty, as I mentioned, we work as the waste prevention team. And our job is to promote waste reduction through digital, such as this, campaigns, and face-to-face presentations and webinars. So the journey of waste or beyond your bin as we like to call it. So what happens to both your recycling and your black bag rubbish beyond your bin after you have presented your bags or bins at the front of your house for collection. So it will be first sent to one of these transfer stations, as you can see on the screen, if you live in North London. And from there, the recycling goes to an MRF, and that stands for Material Recovery Facility. So that's where your recycling is sorted. And it's sorted into separate materials, essentially there, and then transported on to make new products. Your black bag waste, so your general rubbish, goes to the energy from waste, energy recovery facility, which is, as I'm sure you all are very, very familiar with it, at Edmonton in Enfield. At the MRF, the material recovery facility, the recycling load will be visually inspected by for contamination. And what many people don't know is that it's actually inspected by eye. So we have operatives. It's not by some fancy technology. The recycling load is actually inspected by operatives' eyes. So the most common contaminants are nappies, food waste, black sacks, and textiles and clothing. So if the contamination of that load is over 15%, it's rejected at the material recovery facility, and it will then be sent with all the other black bag rubbish. So you can imagine the waste of everyone's kind of really good recycling behaviors if there is too much contamination. So I appreciate this is simple, but the kind of essence of this presentation and our campaign is really to keep the messaging really, really simple. So apologies if this seems too basic, but it's good to kind of get the conversation going. So when we say something is recyclable, it essentially means taking material like the plastic in a plastic bottle or the metal in a baked beans can and putting it through a process so that the material can then be used again and again instead of being wasted. So as I said, to get us to start thinking about recycling, if anyone can hazard a guess and put it in the chat, which of these on your screen, if you could label them A, B, C, D, or E, F, G, H, if you could put those in the chat, which you think are recyclable, emphasis on the R, that would be great, just to kind of get a feel of what people's knowledge is of what's recyclable in your North London curbside collection. Yeah, I can see that in the chat. Thank you, Jenny. I'll give you a couple more seconds. We've got really good answers. Mostly right. There is one that people have missed though. Just to see if anyone wants to hazard a guess at the one people have missed.
Where's chat? Where is chat? Where is the chat?
You click on it.
I haven't got one.
Okay, I will. Yep. So actually, people haven't missed it. Sorry, I got that wrong. People have got it all mostly correct. So yep. So I'll give I think everyone's kind of got the gist of it. So yep, glass bottles are recyclable. Cardboard is recyclable. Plastic food trays are recyclable. We'll get onto the kind of different plastics and the confusion around that later in the presentation, because I appreciate that there's kind of some ambiguity around that. Crisp packets are not recyclable. Polystyrene, there is a trial going on in some of the North London boroughs, but currently the general rule of thumb is it's not recyclable. Yogurt pots, yes. Again, it's that nice hard plastic. Salad bags, no. And aerosols, essentially cans, are recyclable. So I think everyone, yeah, if not all, got that correct. So this is important because I've referenced contamination, the word contamination, quite a lot. So we're getting better at recycling, and everyone is trying to do the right thing, but putting the wrong item in the recycling bin can actually have really significant consequences. So what do we mean by contamination? To simplify it, it simply refers to any unwanted or dirty materials that people include in their recycling bins, or I know some councils have recycling bags. So those materials that you can see on your screen, they are the materials that we don't want, and they all count. as contamination. So general rubbish, also those general, the bags with which you bag up your general rubbish, that counts as contamination. Textiles, electrical goods. Obviously, we're talking about curbside collection. Electrical goods are recyclable at your reuse and recycling center, your tip, your dump. But then we're talking, this presentation is exclusively about curbside collection. Nappies and sanitary products, food waste, polystyrene, and healthcare waste. A good example of healthcare waste at the moment would be the kind of the masks that everyone's wearing at currently with the COVID pandemic. So we conducted a poll with North London residents. We asked about 3,000 people in terms of just to kind of gauge what people's recycling behaviours are, just so that our campaign was targeting the right people and trying to kind of target the right behaviours. So if people can just kind of get a guess what percentage people kind of thought admitted to each of these. There's kind of no right or wrong. It's just, again, just to kind of gauge people's behaviors in terms of recycling and contamination. So if I ask, so how many people admit to putting items in the recycling that they're not sure are actually recyclable? Any guesses? Sorry, yeah, so in terms of how many people admit to putting recycling, putting items in the recycling and they're not sure are actually recyclable, that was 58%. And that is commonly what we refer to as kind of a new concept that's being used in kind of waste management and recycling. It's called wish cycling. So it's often when people who are environmentally conscious want to do the right thing, they want to recycle, but they're not sure. So they put the item in the recycling because they think, oh, it must be recyclable now. That's often a common one. In terms of how many people collect their recycling in a plastic bag and keep it in the bag when they put it in the recycling, any guesses to that? Yeah, so people have gone low on that one. So that was actually 1 in 3. So 33% of people collect their recycling in a plastic bag and then keep it in the bag when they put it in the recycling. That obviously, as we covered, that counts as contamination. When you put in a kind of you would collect your recycling in a Tesco's bag in your house and then put it in the recycling, even though you've got lots of really good recyclable materials in that bag, that kind of plastic bag counts as contamination.
NLWA trying to push their responsibility on people about recycling, saying it's not us, it's you who are doing it all wrong.
And I'll move on quickly to this one. How many people put all plastics in the recycling though they're not sure they could be they can all be recycled? It's not knowing the difference between not knowing the difference between all the different plastics. So yeah, people going for around the 55% mark. Yeah, so it's about 43% of people put all plastics in the recycling, even though they're not sure they can all be recycled. And we'll get on to the kind of confusion over plastics because we appreciate it's often hard to keep up to date with what plastics are recyclable and what plastics aren't recyclable. So I'll move on to the next session. So looking at what contamination looks like here in North London. As highlighted by the pie chart on the slide, this is the breakdown of the different percentages of different recycled materials collected in North London. When we talk about dry recyclables, what we mean is the items that go in your recycling bin or container including those that you can see on the screen. So paper, glass, card, metals and plastics. This figure also shows that out of all the recycling collected from North London curbsides, 11% of all recycling collected last year was contaminated with non-recyclables like nappies, food, clothes, or black bags of rubbish, leading to about 18,000 tons of recycling being sent to waste in 2020 and 2021. So that equates to about 4% being rejected. And as I referenced earlier, you can imagine the waste of the majority of people's good recycling behaviors. If 15% is contaminated, it means that all that recycling is wasted and goes into black bag anyway. So why is contamination actually an issue for us here in North London? Well, for North London, rejected recycling loads cost about £2 million a year paid for by the taxpayer. Contamination can reduce the quality of the materials so much that sometimes we have to reject the whole load of recycling because we wouldn't be able to sell it on for it to then be turned into something new. Black bags were the most common contaminant found in over 500 loads. The reason why black bags are an issue is because when they go to the material recovery facility, the MRF that I referenced earlier, they clog up the machinery in the processing plants. And then often the contents inside those black bags contaminate the rest of the collected recycling load. The next common was textiles, followed by food waste and electrical items. Just a note as well, as I referenced before with electrical goods, with textiles can be recycled at your RRC, your reuse recycling centre, but they can't be recycled in your curbside collection. So just to move on to 3 different scenarios that relate to contamination. They're fairly simple, but just to kind of identify the problem and the solution. So if I read them out again, if people can just put in the chat their answers. Scenario 1, Gemma has just had a takeaway of chips and is not sure what to do with the polystyrene packaging they came in. Gemma wants to do the right thing and recycle it. She noticed the symbol on the packaging picture at the top right there, the number 6 in the triangle. However, she doesn't know whether to place the polystyrene in her black bag rubbish or in her recycling. Which bin should Gemma place the polystyrene packaging into, recycling or general waste? Yep, I think most people, it's a fairly obvious one. General waste was the correct answer. So when it comes to kind of ambiguity over whether something is recyclable, people often get confused between these kind of black triangles and other recycling symbols, because I appreciate there's a lot of symbols that look like each other. We want you to look out purely for these green signs and absolutely not for those black triangles. We understand the symbols on all packaging can be confusing, and certain symbols can be confused with recycling labels. So what is the issue with polystyrene? Well, when it comes to those black triangles, they are actually called RIC symbols, which it means resin identification code. And that's simply an identification put on there by the producer that highlights the type of plastic material. The general rule of thumb is that the lower the code, so in that in this example 1 and 2, the more likely that particular plastic is to be recycled. Both 1 and 2 RIC symbols amongst the most common recyclable materials. So RIC1 is usually drink bottles and cups, and RIC is shampoo bottles and milk bottles. But I must stress that these symbols don't identify whether a material is recyclable or not. You want to look out for these green symbols that will say it's widely recyclable or recyclable in your borough. So, scenario 2. Gita has stored her recycling in a reusable bag in her kitchen, which she will take out to the large communal bin outside of her flats. The items that Gita has ready to recycle include a fizzy drinks can, disposable coffee cup, a shampoo bottle, and used tissue paper. Which of these items should not be placed in the recycling bin? Again, answers in the chat would be fantastic. I'll just take a minute as well, just because you put it in the chat, Jenny, just to answer your question about the green symbols are usually only on food packaging. They're not just on food and drink packaging. They're also on kind of plastic materials. I appreciate the kind of the highlighted green is on food packaging and drinks bottles, cartons. But you'll still see the kind of the tick and the widely recycled symbol on most products, not just food and drinks. And again, I'll just take the moment, Tim. When loads of recycling rejected, this is based on a visual inspection. You said that this is therefore only an approximation. Isn't that right? Yeah, so that's a really good question. So as I said, it's done by eye. So when the recycling loads come into the MRF, they're bailed up. The recycling operatives will look at the bailed up loads. They then make an estimation whether it's over 15%. It's then taken, that recycling load, if they believe it's, and they are experts, of course, if they believe it's to be over 15%, it's then taken for a machinery. The machines then take a sample. So that bit's not done by eye. That's actually infrared technology, I believe. So the first bit's done by eye, but then yeah, you're right. The second bit, when the 15% is measured, that's done by kind of infrared technology. So I'll just get back to contamination scenarios. So I think most people said B and D. Absolutely right. So if we take a look at why those why GT's items were not recyclable, often a key reason why people contaminate is the belief that an item or material should be recyclable by now. We talked about that term, wish cycling. So in terms of why a coffee cup's not recyclable yet, takeaway coffee cups are made out of paper, and so a lot of people assume that they too can be recycled. However, takeaway coffee cups are made with a special coating, often wax, so that they can contain your hot beverage. This means the cup is non-recyclable in your curbside collection. And it's the same process as I'll get onto now with tissue paper. So why is tissue paper not recyclable? A lot of tissue paper is made from already recycled material, recycled paper, sorry. So that tissue paper that you see is often the kind of at the end of the life cycle of a piece of already recycled paper, if that makes sense. This means that it can't be recycled again, as the fibers are too weak and will result in a poor pulp in the recycling process. So when paper is recycled, it's shredded, mixed with water to form a slurry. This then hardens over time, and obviously is then created, made into new paper. Tissue paper is too weak for that process to take place. And with the coffee cups, as the same kind of a similar process with cardboard, that wax would ruin the creation of new cardboard or paper. So in regards to scenario 1 and 2, to help tackle the issue of confusing packaging and the confusion over whether an item is recyclable yet, there are some engaging resources available to you on our website. So we have the Where Does My Recycling page go on our website that provides an overview of the kind of journey of each of the different recycling materials that we've talked about today. And there is also an A to Z of materials on our website. This is a fairly recent feature, but one that we're really proud of, because it allows you to search nearly any item in the search bar that you can see on the right hand side of your screen there, and it will kind of inform you whether a material is recyclable or not. So we're continually adding to that kind of database, for want of a better term, and we have over 300 items we've now got on the A to Z of materials. So hopefully we're covering all bases. There's always some materials that are very niche and kind of slip through the net, but we're always adding to it, and we always kind of look for feedback from residents to see if we can add more materials on there. But hopefully that will yeah, so flower pots, Jenny, I advise you to put it into the find an item on the what we can recycle A to Z material page. Hopefully that will kind of answer your question with regards to that. And moving on to contamination scenario 3, just the last one. Ahmed has just come home from work and has finished cooking dinner for his family. He is somewhere he needs to be, so begins to clean up quickly after dinner. Several of the cans that Ahmed used to prepare the food have beans and sauce in the bottom. As Ahmed is in a rush, he squashed the can and placed them in his recycling bin. Quite simply, what has Ahmed done wrong? Yep, I think most people are getting them. Yep. Yep. I think everyone's got the kind of general gist of it. So moving on. So in terms of the need to clean, why is there a need to clean? Obviously, cleaning your cans, plastic, and food-related recyclables is important, as leftover food residue can contaminate other recyclables when they're collected together at the MRF, obviously. When paper is recycled, for example, is mixed with water to form a slurry, as we've already talked about. Oil and fat from food residue does not mix with water. Instead, it floats to the top of the slurry and mingles with the paper pulp. Oily pulp obviously then makes for very poor quality paper and is then in effect unusable. In addition, as I said, all accepted materials go in the recycling collection together at the MRF. This creates the risk of grease or food residue transferring from plastic and metal or glass onto another material. And I know this is basically, it's a fairly easy process to remember, a tip, if you will. It should be noted, obviously, as I'm sure everyone's aware, when if anyone's ever put their recycling outside of their house the night before and in the morning they've come and seen some kind of fox or other vermin, birds even have ripped apart the recycling, it's all over the street. Obviously, food waste in your recycling has the potential to attract vermin such as flies and rats. Another handy tip is to use dishwater to save on water consumption. And if the material is not recyclable, for example, so say a pizza box, which can often get greasy, you can often rip the top half off if the other half is greasy and recycle it. So coming to the end, and I'll have, if I've missed any questions on the chat, myself and Kirsty will be more than happy to kind of try and cover them when I finish now. So what have we learned? We've learned what kind of contamination is and how you can avoid it. We've kind of discussed why it's a problem here in North London. Another handy tip is to remember that if it can't go in household recycling, there's obviously the option to consider repair or think beyond your doorstep and utilize the local reuse recycling centres, which we've talked about. Or I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with kind of websites like FreeCycle. If you think someone else would have a use for a material that you no longer have a need for. And the kind of 3 actions that could make a difference to recycling rates, not only here in North London, but nationally is, and we've talked about these, but just to kind of consolidate those, is make sure packaging is empty and rinse off any food. Avoid putting black bin bags in your recycling, or collecting your recycling in a bag, and then putting it in the recycling. And if you're not sure whether something is recyclable, I obviously advise people to look at our website. But I appreciate not everyone has access to kind of IT services. So if you're still unsure, if in doubt, leave it out and put it in the black bin. Sometimes, especially if it's with a very kind of a niche item that you're just simply not sure, you've looked it up and you're still not sure, it's better to put it in your black bag rubbish rather than contaminate your recycling. So thank you very much for your time. I hope everyone feels even a little bit more knowledgeable about the do's and don'ts of recycling. As I said, please look at our website on that A to Z, and also the journey of waste to be on the bin. It's, even if it's out of curiosity, it's really interesting to see where everyone's the journey of your recycling and the journey of your black bag waste. And if you have any questions regarding the recycling services in North London, I will, and the next slide is our waste prevention inbox that is open to all North London residents. If it's any questions you have, however big or small, we endeavour to reply to that as quickly as possible. And myself and Kirsty actually manage that inbox. So if you have any questions, please get in touch. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Josh. This is very interesting and thought-provoking and quite surprising in some cases, knowing that those triangles don't necessarily mean recyclable was totally new to me, and I guess to other people.
Yes, yeah, and I
very
think
interesting.
I think we use the just touching upon that. I think we use that example as an example, but that kind of is that kind of highlights a general confusion over recycling symbols that we're very aware of. I know that coffee cups, which is why we included that example, is that they have the kind of the circle and recyclable, whereas it's a little bit cheeky, because if you actually look at the kind of, especially like, let's use Costa as an example. If you look at the kind of fine print, so to say, it says recyclable at the store. Well, you and I know that most people, when they have a takeaway coffee, you're very unlikely to then go back to the shop that you've come from to recycle it. So, I mean, that's a whole nother argument about kind of greenwashing or kind of environmental marketing, but that's why there's often confusion about coffee cups. So we just kind of try and really simplify the message and say, look out for the widely recyclable and the symbol there. I'm just going to invite, before we get into questions, I think Kirsty will also, is she still on the call?
Oh, good morning.
Hi, Kirsty. Kirsty will help me answer any questions. So yeah, if anyone has any questions.
There's some in the chat, so should we try and answer those first? And then I can see some hands up, so we'll go to the hands afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I can see that Tim has said, I've seen that supermarkets offer recycling for some plastics. Some of these are plastic bags. I think, for example, Tesco say they will recycle all soft plastics. Do you know anything about these services, where the plastics are sent, and and who does the recycling? Sorry, struggling to read this morning. If they can recycle soft plastics, why not North London? Really good question. So if you don't mind, Josh, I'll kick off with this one. So yeah, more and more you see supermarkets taking in soft plastics such as the bread packets and things like crisp packets and stuff like that, which is really great. The reason that we don't do that in North London at the moment, and as far as I'm aware across London and most of the UK, is that these types of plastics are very, very thin and therefore quite a poor quality material. So when you melt them back down to produce something else, it's really difficult to then you can't make a like for like product. It melts down into pretty much nothing. So that's why they have to, if they are going to be recycled, they have to be recycled separately. And I know the majority of the North London boroughs, if not, no, all of them, they don't really do separate segregated recycling, and it's really important for materials that are difficult to recycle, such as soft plastics, to be recycled separately. So I hope that helps to answer your question. We also had Jenny say it would be good to promote where the boroughs, in the boroughs where people can recycle batteries and pill packs. So I've popped a link in there. It's NLWA place to recycle. So if you follow that link, that will link you to where you can recycle all kinds of things, including those batteries. Unfortunately, pill packets aren't currently recycled, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
And then someone else has said, so Tony said, advice regarding carrier bags from supermarkets can be recycled, but not smaller, lighter weight bags. Is that right? So technically they can be recycled, but again, it's not something that we promote too much. So as part of the contract in North London, we all of North London residential waste, I'm sure Josh has mentioned, goes to BIFA, and within that contract they do accept it and therefore will aim to recycle it. But as I said before, it's not a very high quality material, desirable material for recycling. So I hope that helps. So should we go on to, there's a few more questions, but I know I said we'd ask the people with their hands up next. So should we do that and then we can continue?
I'll just quickly, Aurora, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. In terms of a lot of people in Enfield don't understand what can be recycled because of the limited knowledge of English. It's a really, really valid point, and I believe that that's it's a relevant argument for a lot of the North London boroughs, which have very, very diverse communities. I think it's a good point, and I know it's been kind of discussed previously, but it's a really good point, and something that I'd be more than happy to feed back to our kind of senior management team, because disseminating information amongst the communities, trying to make a service available to all is essentially what we want to do. So thank you for the feedback, and it's definitely something that I've made a note of and will feedback. Should we take some of the questions with the hands up?
Yes, please.
So I can't really see names on those, so
I see Reva and Frank. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I've put it in the chat, but some years ago I had a tour of the North London waste recycling with all the compost where the food always goes. So I understand it's not processed there, and we were able to buy the compost for our gardens. Is this service still available as it's being processed somewhere else these days? That's the food waste.
Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not. With the new facility being built, that composting area is no longer there. And it's currently being reviewed by our strategy and services team. So we don't currently know the answer, but I can imagine it won't be for at least the next few years, unfortunately. I hope that helps to answer your question. And sorry, it's a bit of a disappointing one.
It is being reviewed though, as you say, Kirsty, isn't it? So any updates will be posted on our website or your local council Enfield website.
Tony, who is masquerading as Enfield Forum, seems to have had his hand up a long time.
Yes. What do we do with small amounts of metals? Nails, screws, cables from computer cables and all of the redundant electrical goods that we have. So
I'll take this one, Kirsty. In terms of your local RRC, they accept those metals that you referenced, and they also take cables as well. So if you're able to access your reuse and recycling centre, those materials are accepted there.
Okay, and also what goes into what do you put into the Edmonton incinerator? Can you clarify that for me, please? I'd very much appreciate it. So
it's the general waste, so the black bag waste that goes to Edmonton.
And what sort of pollutants do you separate out from the waste as it's being burned? I mean, have you got collections for, if somebody puts in a piece of copper wire, it could have copper cadmium in there, which is the pollutant. It can have all sorts of volatile metals in there.
We'll have to get back to you on that one because it's our colleagues who work on the project, and we work in the waste prevention team, so we're not directly working at the incinerator or know that much about it in terms of exact pollutants and stuff. But we could certainly get an answer back to you.
Yeah,
And we've
I'll
got
put
loads of
the,
information on the website, which I can pop up as well.
yeah. There's the NOHPP North London Heat and Power Project email address, and a vague answer would be that obviously the new eco park is taking into consideration air quality control. So, but yeah, the best thing to do would be to look at NOHPP website, and we'll provide the email address as well.
So yeah, I'll pop that in the chat for you now. So that's
Sarah, do you want to answer?
Yeah. Does your organisation have any sort of programme to help people who are challenged by all this? I'll give a couple of examples. One I put in the chat about disabled people getting to the regional recycling centres with stuff that can't be collected from the curbside. But another example is the expense of replacing broken bins. We had to do this recently. It was nearly £100, one thing and another. And our old bin lid wasn't keeping things dry anymore. So I would like to see North London Waste Authority providing some sort of programme, charitable help, foundation assistance for people who on low incomes or disability are really struggling with stuff that you have as normal behaviour or desired behaviour. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for your question, Sarah. No, that's a really, really important thing to consider, particularly at the RRCs. It's certainly something I'll feed back, and I'll try and get more information on if you're interested. When it comes to the wheelie bins, unfortunately, it's the council that provide those, so we're not responsible for providing any containers. And I know some councils give out bins for free and some charge, such as my borough here in Waltham Forest. So it's a little frustrating, especially if like it just goes walkies and you have to replace it and it's not even your fault, or it's not even because it's old and broken. So yeah, very frustrating. But unfortunately that responsibility does lie with the council, so it's not something we can support with. Vivian, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I think it's timely, and I think almost everybody has learnt something from it, even those of us who think that we're morbid recyclers. But I'm the health lead on the Over 50s Forum, and one of the reasons I think this presentation is very timely is because there is rising anxiety about the proposal to expand the waste facility. And one of the things that strikes me very strongly is that we really need to be extremely worried about the amount of material going into the black plastic sacks, both from households and from the process that you've very carefully explained to us. And so if you have the capacity to send messages back up the line or across, it would be very helpful if you could send the message that what many people in Enfield would want, and certainly the Forum is in favour of, is vastly improved sorting out of the black plastic contents, because I think all of us are aware that a great deal of it is recyclable or could become in the near future recyclable, because the science is onto that kind of thing now. So thank you for the presentation, but can you see if you can nag upwards that the Forum is concerned about the content of the black plastic sacks and convinced that a very high percentage of it is recyclable, and that the money going into expanding the recycling, the facility in Edmonton might be better spent on science improving our capacity to separate and recycle what is now being thrown away. Thank you.
Thank you. So when it comes to contamination, so people putting the wrong things in the recycling bins. We do lots of different campaigns as the waste prevention team, and the waste prevention program's been running for nearly 16 years, and it's won lots of different awards. So we try to get that message across about what you can recycle and what not to put in those black bags through programs and projects, and just communicating with residents, so such as speaking with you lovely people today. And it is frustrating, and not everyone does it, and we all know our neighbours or even our family members that don't do the right thing. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have the technology to go through those black sacks just for the sheer volume. And it would at the moment have to go to a completely different facility if we were to do that. And so that would also cost lots and lots of money. So I know that some things exist, such as it's called a dirty MRF, which is where you can try and extract material. But at the moment, that's not something we do in North London. So we're trying to educate people as much as possible when it comes to recycling. We work with the councils, all 7 boroughs. We liaise with them every single month to get updates from them, provide updates for them, work with them on events and things that they're doing. And when it comes to the heat and power project, so the incinerator, it's not something I'm going to comment on largely, as I said before, but we do have an email address there if you have any specific questions. I've popped that in the chat, that they'll be able to help you better than I will when it comes to that.
Would you allow me to come back just very briefly?
Oh, please do.
Very briefly. Yeah, I understand you're in a difficult position. You know, I understand all that. But you see, what you said was it would cost a lot of money, but then so does the expansion of the present facility. And just to be absolutely clear, the reason why I mentioned that I'm the health lead is because my main concern is with the fine particulates that are being created by the burning that Tony Watts referred to earlier. Those fine particulates are extremely bad for the respiratory health of people in Enfield, particularly the poorer parts of Enfield. And we have emerging knowledge that they're actually bad for the as yet unborn, because they get into the placenta and so on. So I'm only emphasizing the reason why I said what I said was because I'm the health lead, and we have very poor respiratory health that is putting heavy pressure on the North Mid.
We would also prefer for people to produce less waste, and I completely agree with you. It's not an ideal situation, but yeah, we probably won't be talking too much about the details of that. Oh, that's my dog in the background.
I'll take over just while that yappy little thing. Jenny, sorry, you had your.
Thank you. No, just to follow on from Vivian's point, I'm a public health specialist as well, particularly mental health, and I'm extremely worried about the long-term implications for the communities of the change and the expansion that's being has been agreed, but we hope won't happen. But to take something that might be easier for you to take back to those those who employ you, if your team was greatly expanded so that there was material in other languages, there was material that was taken around to shopkeepers, because people could also choose between products that they might sell as well, and was there's communication with community groups, you know, very regularly. I'm sure, you know, you're both enthusiastic and you're working hard, but you know, you're only the team that you are. Then what, you know, I would like to see that, and I suspect that other parts of the country do a lot better in not rejecting so much of the material that's collected, and in informing the public and businesses in the area as well. And you know, for a fraction of what we're talking about that's being spent on the large facility, we could achieve a real change. And what would be, in your view, something that you might be able to answer, what would be the sort of percentages we should be aiming at for recycling what could and should be recycled within North London?
Yeah, I'll take that question. I guess it might be a slightly convoluted answer, which I'm sure you probably expect. So, but I do appreciate your tone, Jenny, because I think you probably realise we work in waste prevention, and that's often sometimes people sometimes get slightly confused with our role as waste prevention and the complete separate role of the NLHPP, North London Heat and Power Project team. Our sole goal is, or goals are, waste minimisation, waste reduction, and increased recycling rates. So if you look at that, the one aspect, waste reduction, that is kind of the exact common goal of those that would be opposing the project as well. Everyone has that common goal of wanting to reduce waste. We want to reduce and by reducing waste, you're hopefully indirectly going to increase recycling rates. I appreciate what you're saying about the kind of community groups. Myself, Kirsten, and the rest of the waste prevention team, there's about 6 of us. We do work extensively across the 7 North London boroughs. We try and make sure it's equitable. I'm currently, just as an example, I think this hopefully kind of will touch upon a little bit what you're saying. I mean, look, the caveat is there's always more that can be done. So if I had my way, I'd be talking to a community group every single day. But as an example, I've just recently started the Low Plastic Zones initiative. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, in Southgate in Enfield. So at least it's relevant, which is kind of talking to businesses and getting them to sign up to pledges about how they can reduce their plastics. We trialed it last week, and it's hopefully going to be launched quite soon. So 50% of the businesses in the Southgate area have signed up to it, which is fantastic. So that's one initiative that I hope kind of highlights to you what we're trying to do. In terms of the recycling rates, what we'd like to get to and what more could be done, I'm not going to, as you probably can assume, I'm not going to be able to give you a really direct answer. I can tell you that we have obviously our overarching targets and plans. So we have a residual waste reduction plan that guides us every 2 years, and we have our target recycling rates. And the pandemic obviously had a massive impact on our projected recycling rates. So we're trying to revise those targets, and we're trying to collectively work with each of the 7 North London boroughs, which as I'm sure you're aware, they do have different recycling rates. And that's through a combination of disseminating information through community networks, and also obviously there is the services and logistics side as well that is, and I'm not just saying this as kind of hot air, it's continuously being monitored and evaluated. As Kirsty said, we're not necessarily saying that the option that's been put forward is the best option in a kind of ever, but we obviously don't work on that side of the business.
No, that's fair enough. Just welcome what you're saying about the, I hope it's just a pilot and it will then become across North London on the reduce plastics for businesses. Because I spend about 3 days a week picking plastic up with litter pickers out of the lakes in the parks or caught in the brambles, and it's there forever until somebody goes and pulls it out, and it's just, you know, appalling. It's all stuff that people buy, casually throw away, and then it's just there, caught up in our natural world.
Of course, and but yeah. So to just quickly answer your question, the Low Plastic Zones initiative is being rolled out, but borough-wide, so across all the 7 North London boroughs. So unfortunately, I think it was started 2 years ago, but obviously COVID has had a massive impact on that stuff. But yeah, that is going forward. Lindsay, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Just turn something off mute. I just wondered how much when you put things up on social media, whether you check for each borough, whether it affects them, because you recently put up about the fact that you could recycle toothpaste tubes if you cut them in half. I thought toothpaste tubes had metal linings and weren't recyclable, certainly not in Enfield. I've asked a question, I haven't had an answer yet in Enfield. I just think it's confusing if you don't check with every borough that it does, something that they can actually do is in the borough.
Yes, well, obviously all the recycle goes to the same facility in terms of all the 7 North London boroughs. So obviously
Enfield, it's worth noting Enfield have their own contract with BIFA, so we don't have our we have a contract for the 6 boroughs, and Enfield at the moment have a direct contract with BIFA, but again, it is like Josh said, it's the same facility, so likely the exact same things.
But our internal communications team, they are in contact with the kind of their borough counterparts. I can't say with complete certainty that they are definitely recyclable in Enfield. I know that they if you cut off the tube, the kind of plastic top, that they are recyclable in most, if not all, boroughs. I can't say with complete surety, but if it's some kind of if it gives you any assurity that our internal communications team are constantly checking, reviewing service updates with their borough counterparts. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Lindsay.
Well, I'll wait to get an answer from Enfield, and I'll get back in touch with you if they aren't recyclable in Enfield, because that would possibly add to contamination, which would be rather stupid. With something that North London Waste has put out on social media saying everyone can do, and then you find out that it's just possibly adding to contamination within Enfield.
So as far as I'm aware, if you do cut them out and you scrape it out, it can be recycled. However, very few people, including myself, unfortunately, probably be willing to do that, to cut it open and scrape out all the toothpaste. So I think it's one of those tricky ones where technically it is, but if people are willing to do that, which I'm sure it's a big ask.
I do it for everything else, so I don't see why it should be any different. You probably reuse it, to be perfectly honest, and just put it on the toothbrush. Sorry. I can't see how cleaning out a toothpaste tube is any different to a baked bean tin.
I'm going to answer a couple of questions from the chat, because I know we've probably not been able to answer all of them. So it would be great if you did have any questions. If they're relating to the waste prevention team, I've got the email address for us there. And then if they're relating to the North London Heat and Power Project, can you pop them over there? So I've got one from Victoria here who says, what happens to food waste from commercial outlets? Is it recycled? So for a commercial outlet, it is the responsibility of the commercial unit, shop, whatever it might be, to dispose of their waste. So they have to pay usually, unless they've got a discount for some reason, such as being a charity, etc. And they can choose who they go with. So for example, if the council provides a commercial collection service, they can choose to go with the council. However, they can choose to also go with a variety of private organisations as well. So I hope that helps to answer your question. And Sylvia said, should plastic bottles have their lids left on? Would you like to answer that one, Josh? Oh, Josh, gone? Oh, you're there. Sorry.
Sorry, my connection's not working.
I'll answer that one then, no problem. So with plastic bottles, you can either leave them on or leave them off. However, when we do get asked this question, we recommend taking them off. Simply because if you've got a milk bottle, for example, and you leave the lid on, when it goes into the back of the recycling lorry and it doesn't happen to get crushed, then you're carrying essentially a large container with air. So that's one reason why I'd suggest it. Another reason is the plastic bottle has 2 different materials. Usually you'd have like a green or whatever colour, red, blue lid. That's a different type of plastic to the main bottle. And so those types of plastics need to be segregated separately. So you're helping the process by taking off the lid. That would be my answer to that one. And we've got 2 minutes left. So if anyone else try and find some more questions.
Jenny, I'm not sure if we answered this one. The recycling centres are sited in places that are hard to reach on foot. Public transport seem to assume everyone has a car. It's a completely valid point. We have recently done and I know this is not really answering your question, so apologies, but we recently did a series of social media posts just to highlight that the booking system that came in because of COVID and it's still continued. A lot of the confusion that Kirsty and I received when we did kind of presentations where people saying, that you can't access them by foot. In terms of the booking system and the actual access, you're of course allowed to go by foot. You are allowed to. So I do appreciate that that can be challenging, and they potentially are sometimes in places that cannot be or are harder to reach. So I can't really answer that one, but well, by only kind of saying that the booking system is not just for cars. You can still use the booking system and turn up by foot. But I appreciate if that's hard to reach, that doesn't really solve the issue.
Chair, Aurora's been indicating for a long time.
Aurora.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that you are a very small team and that you have a huge task. And I wanted to ask if you have any ways of measuring whether your work has any impact on increasing recycling in Enfield, not in Enfield, but in the north of London. And given that there is actually not a very good recycling rate across North London, which is 28%, and it's been going down and down in the last few years. And yeah, so I wanted to know about that. And I wanted to stress again that it's not enough to have a small pilot project in Enfield to recycle, to introduce recycling facilities in flats, because as we go deeper, I mean, in more central areas, there are more and more flats, and a solution needs to be found very urgently to that. So
if I take the first bit, and then Kirsty, do you want to answer the question just regarding that the pilot scheme of flats, if that works?
Yeah, sure.
In terms of your first question, it's actually it's a fantastic question, and it's one that obviously Kirsty and I, when we work very much in engagement and communication, we're constantly looking for indicators and kind of that can quantify our work, because obviously we're in the business to make a difference. That's not a kind of a corporate tagline. It's why we kind of joined the organization. We're passionate about recycling. We're passionate about waste management. We every single engagement event we do, we record the kind of the reach or the kind of participation levels, and that then is compiled into and is fed back into the residual waste reduction plan that I referenced earlier, that kind of works at our targets. So we have targets for our work in terms of how many people we need to engage with, how many events we must attend, social media targets as well, as I'm sure you're aware. The recycling rates have taken a hit, obviously largely due to COVID. We're working our best to obviously increase them. Different boroughs have different recycling rates, not just because of services, but because just due to the nature of kind of the makeup. Some have higher proportion of flats. Some of the kind of boroughs like Barnet and Enfield have a higher number of single occupancy households. But we are trying to increase recycling rates. Obviously, that's our main goal. Kirsty, do you want to take the second part of that question?
So
thank you very much. Could we just have two quick questions, because we are running out of time? So could Tony E give us his question, please, and then Tony Watts, and then that will be it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very quick one, just coming back to Kirsty's answer about plastic bottles and lids. Kirsty, when you've taken the lids off, you then put them also into the recycling bin or into general waste?
Into the recycling bin. The lids usually are recyclable as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony.
My question is, we have within Enfield, we have a brown bin collection service for food waste, and this is a small van that goes around the streets. It seems, from where I live, relatively not very much is collected. It would be quite useful if that could be shared with collecting small appliances, something which for most people, they don't want to go down to the recycling centre to take these things in, because it's a trip in the car, which is again a a pollution problem. Could you sort of raise it that that could be possibly extended to take on these small appliances, things like cables as well, which can be easily recycled? Because
it's a fantastic suggestion, and I really appreciate that you want to make it more efficient. But the food vehicle, as far as I'm aware, is probably the same as other ones I've seen, are very separate vehicles. There isn't much space. It has to contain the food, and there's lots of scientific stuff to store that without it smelling too much and stuff. So I don't think it would be appropriate for the food vehicle. Potentially the recycling vehicle. Unfortunately, again, that goes back to Enfield service, which isn't something we have direct control over or influence over. So I think the best suggestion would be probably to contact the council about that suggestion. Unfortunately, so sorry, that probably isn't as the answer you wanted, but I do really like the idea of being able to collect more. And I know some boroughs, for example, I used to live in Brent, they would do that, particularly with clothes and things like that. So yeah, not impossible, definitely, if you contact them about it.
Thank you.
Right, thank you ever so much, Josh and Kirsty. We've had a very entertaining and informative talk, which we often get one or the other, but not both at the same time. So thank you very much indeed. It's been really, really entertaining. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for all the questions. I hope it was, even if it improves everyone's knowledge a little bit. But yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for being so engaged.
Thank you for coming.
Great, and
Thanks,
sorry we
everyone.
couldn't get around to everyone's questions or answer everyone's questions. Do get in touch via those email addresses, and we'll try our best to get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Have a lovely day. Bye.